Good morning. There you go. So I am, you can either call me Assemblyman Sepulveda or Senator Sepulveda, it doesn't really matter at this point. But
By the way, he was a great colleague in the Assembly, too. That's why I still refer him to being in the People's House.
Thank you.
You got a Sepulveda look.
Thank you. So I'm glad that Joe spoke first because he did mention a lot of things that I wanted to say. When I speak about criminal justice reform this year, I tell people that as of, I believe, April 9th, when the Senate passed the criminal justice reform packages, that the criminal justice system in the state of New York is completely different, is 1,000-fold more times more just. Some of the changes are going to be transformative. And even though sometimes the advocates, when they don't get 100%, are not happy, but I can tell you that with this reform package that happened in April, that it's going to make a significant difference in the lives of people, especially people that come from communities of color. So I'm very proud to have Assemblyman Lento has indicated that he's been through so much history. I'm very proud to say that I was an active participant and voted yes on those reform packages. Right now, my focus is on two issues, aside from everything that we have to deal with in the state. But, I'm really dealing with two issues that have impacts in communities of color, which I represent, and which I know that essentially the criminal justice system is the last of the Jim Crow. So where I'm focusing my attention, the remaining session is on Holt solitary confinement and on the green light bill. Why the green light bill? We know that that's more of an immigration issue. However, the way the criminal justice system, ICE, treats immigrants, separates families, puts children in cages is something that we as a nation and as a state should always oppose. With respect to Holt, I'm visiting, my intention is to visit all the prisons in the state of New York during my chairmanship. But I've started that process now, and I've seen several facilities. And last week, I went to Mariah Shock, visited that facility. I was emailed or texted an article today about some of the things that we didn't hear or see while at Mariah Shock, about some of the things that go on in these shock programs. So we're going to look into that. But to me, what's interesting is that African Americans, Latinos make about 18 to 25% of the population. Yet there are about 50% of those that are incarcerated. And what I find deeply troubling is that of people that are in solitary confinement, about 60 to 65% of them are people of color. So look at that, 18% of the population, over 50% of the arrest rate, and over 60% of those that are in solitary confinement. United Nations, as we know, has indicated that solitary confinement beyond 15 days is torture. And no matter how we try to describe it, no matter how we try to water it down or how we try to give an impression that it's not torture, when you have an international organization telling us that some of our practices are torture, then it's something that we as a nation and certainly as a state, we have to address. I've spoken with the stakeholders. Some will say, well, we really don't have solitary confinement in the state of New York anymore because it's a cell, and yes, they're alone, but it's open. But I've seen some of these cells that they claim are not solitary confinement. While it's true that some are open, it's still a cell where you can barely take 4 steps. And I don't care how you try to minimize the impact. When you spend months, days, years, weeks in that environment, there's just no way that anyone can convince me that you're going to come out a better person, that you're going to come out better disciplined. I spend 24 minutes enclosed, and I tell people that if I was there for a prolonged period of time, I probably would have come out 10 times worse. That's the kind of impact that it is. And when you speak to some of these individuals that are in solitary confinement, it's just a mind-blowing experience. And so we're working to make sure that solitary confinement becomes the law of the state of New York. I have to give a plug to Diana Goodwin. Diana, where are you? There you go. Diana, who's my brain trust on these issues. But certainly, solitary confinement has to be reformed. People talk about the NYCLA agreement. That's not codified, first of all, and second of all, I don't think in some respects it goes far enough. We have to provide more alternative programs because incarceration is supposed to be a place to rehabilitate and not a place to die or a place for you to essentially live the rest of your life getting worse, not rehabilitating. We want to create an environment here where people get better, and then post-release, people can get housing, can get jobs, because as we know that I think within 3 years, those that are released, or 65% of them return back to the cells, and that's because we're not, to the prisons, because we're not creating an environment where people can succeed after they are released. And within the cells, within the prison system, we're not really creating an environment where people can be better prepared. And so that's a big part of what I'm trying to accomplish for the rest of session, along with the Green Light Bill, because we know that a lot of times families are separated because someone may have run a stop sign or a red light, and it becomes an experience that no one should live through, especially if you have children. And so, you know, those two are integral parts of my Green Light is indirect criminal justice agenda, but certainly solitary confinement is part of it. And I can tell you that now that he's here, I really want to thank Senator Jamal Bailey, who deserves a lot of credit for what happened on April 9th. Jamal and I have spoken many times about criminal justice, and I'm happy to say and proud to say that as a fellow Bronxite, that the Bronx had a big part to play in the criminal justice system in the state of New York. Thank you.